Are you ready for the Word of God? Okay, very good. So today we're going to look at a parable. The parable of the dishonest manager. The parable of the dishonest manager. Now, how many of you love parables? Okay, not many of you. Not many of you. Surprising. When I was a young Christian, I loved parables because they are easy to read. It's short. Doesn't take a lot of time, but after a little while, I grow to understand that it is not exactly easy to understand. Now, what are parables? Parables are short stories that are used to teach important lessons. They are not real stories; they are make-up. However, parables use real and familiar everyday life as backdrops, so that listeners can identify with the stories. Now, money is a common theme in Jesus' parables. Now, would you like to make a guess of how many parables there are in the Bible, in the Gospels? Not double count, right? Some parables appear on more than one Gospels. How many parables are there? Do you think there are there? About 40. I use the word about simply because different classification. So it's between 39 to about 41, 42 parables. There are about 40 parables altogether spoken by Jesus, recorded in the four Gospels, or rather in only three Gospels. And 1/3 of them have to do with money, wealth, and material possession. Now, that is a lot, right? That is a lot. 1/3 of them got to do with money, wealth, and material possessions. Now, Jesus talked a lot about money. A lot about money. More than heaven and earth combined. Some of you are surprised to hear that. Well, that's because the issue of money is important. The issue of money is supremely important, and our attitude towards money is important. How we think about money and how we utilize money have far-reaching implications for our lives and also for our eternity. People understand that there are implications for our life, but few people understand that our attitude towards money and how we utilize money also have implications for your eternity and for my eternity. And here's another important point about money. Whether you care to admit it or not, money tugs at our heartstrings. Okay, I always tell people that there is a string connecting our wallet and our bank account to our heart. Touch anything in our lives is okay. God, I'm willing to surrender every aspect of my life, but touch the wallet, touch the bank account, touch the money, something pulls in our heart, and we sense reluctance. We sense that, well, perhaps God should give us more freedom to manage our own finances than what He has been. So many things that have been said in the words of God regarding it. Now, Jesus talks a lot about money, but that's not to suggest that Jesus is a prosperity gospel preacher. The prosperity gospel teachers love to twist Jesus' word to make it sound like that's what Jesus is all about. He's talking about money and he's teaching us how to walk in a certain way, how to be faithful in order that we may prosper. But that's not the case. On the contrary, Jesus often warned about the dangers of the love of money. He often warned that people who are obsessed with money, with making money, fall into temptations and all sorts of troubles easily. Worse, Jesus also said that it is hard for those who put their trust in their worldly wealth and possessions to enter the kingdom of God. And it is true. It is true. I've been a keen observer of life, and I have many friends, more than most of you, and I have friends who are super rich as well, and I realize that Jesus is absolutely right. It is difficult for people who are really wealthy to enter the kingdom of heaven. Now, Jesus' parable on money focus on different aspects of money and wealth. But in the parable of the dishonest manager, the focus is on the Christian stewardship of our earthly possession. The focus of this parable is on the Christian stewardship, the Christian financial stewardship of our earthly possessions. It concerns our attitude and utilization of money, that is, how we should view money and how we should utilize the money that God has given to us. Okay, a better way of putting it is the money that God has entrusted to us. That's the idea of Christian stewardship. Now, how many of you are familiar with this parable? The parable of the dishonest manager. Okay, very few. Okay, I suppose when we read it, you realize, I've read this parable before. It is not an unfamiliar parable. The next question I'm going to ask you is, what do you think of the parable? What do you think of the parable? Now, the story is highly entertaining. Okay, most parables are interesting, but this story is highly entertaining. But I'm sure you will agree with me that this is one of the most difficult parables to understand. In fact, it might be the most difficult parable to understand. Now, after working through this parable and preparing this sermon, I still think that it is very difficult to understand this parable, but I'm going to try my very best to explain the parable and make a few applications. Now, most parables are not exactly easy to understand, but this one is really, really, really very, very, very tough. Okay, why out? In a nutshell, let me put it this way. Now, why would the rich master praise his dishonest manager? Why did Jesus cite the unethical action of the dishonest manager with approval and use him as an example to his disciples? It's like he's telling, it's like Jesus is saying, look at this dishonest manager, okay? Follow his example. It's really challenging, okay? It's really, really challenging. And then, it is also difficult to see how the three lessons that Jesus highlighted at the end of the parable match or connect with the story itself. It took me a little while. Actually, over the years, I've been struggling with it, but I don't know why. It's a random sermon, right? So I can choose anything that I want to preach. I don't know why I land on this. Call it the Holy Spirit's leading. Call it taking up a challenge, whatever it is. Anyway, I've chosen it and I'm preaching it. So let's turn to the parable right now. We find in Luke chapter 16. Okay, let's read this surprising and enigmatic parable. Luke 16, reading from verses 1 to 13. Jesus also said to the disciples, there was a rich man who had a manager, and charges were brought against the manager that this man was wasting his possessions. And so the master called him and said to him, what is this that I hear about you? Turn in the account of your management, for you can no longer be manager. And the manager said to himself, what shall I do? Since my master is taking the management away from me, I'm not strong enough to dig, and I'm ashamed to beg. I've decided what to do. So that when I'm removed from management, people may receive me into their houses. So summoning his master's debtors one by one, he said to the first, how much do you owe my master? He said, 100 measures of oil. He said to him, take your bill and sit down quickly and write 50% discount. And then he said to another, how much do you owe? So the man said, 100 measures of wheat. So he said to the man, take your bill and write 80, 20% discount. The master commended the dishonest manager for his shrewdness. Okay? The master commended the manager for his shrewdness. And the emphasis is on the manager, dishonest manager. Okay? The master commended the dishonest manager for his shrewdness. And Jesus went on to say, for the sons of this world are more shrewd in dealing with their own generation than the sons of light. And I tell you, make friends for yourselves by means of unrighteous wealth, your money, so that when it fails, they may receive you into eternal dwellings. Now, one who is faithful in a very little is also faithful in much. And one who is dishonest in a very little is also dishonest in much. If then you have not been faithful in the unrighteous wealth, who will entrust you with the true riches? And if you have not been faithful in that which is another's, who will give you that which is your own? No servant can serve two masters. Either he will hate the one and love the other, or he will be devoted to the one and despise the other. You cannot serve God and money. Now, Jesus spoke many parables to the crowds. Some he spoke to the crowds, some he spoke to his disciples. Okay? So before speaking this parable, Jesus spoke three parables. The parable of the lost coin, the parable of the lost sheep, and the parable of the lost son. Most of us are familiar with the title, the parable of the prodigal son. Those three parables are evangelistic parables designed to bring the crowd, designed to bring people into the kingdom of God. In fact, it was specifically stated that he spoke those three parables to the Pharisees and the religious leaders because he knew that they were lost in their religiosity and all their legalism. And so Jesus spoke those three parables to them and to the crowd. But as is evident by the first verse in today's text, the parable of the dishonest manager was directed at his disciples. That is, those who had already believed in him and were committed to follow him. So this parable contains a discipleship message. This is how Jesus wanted his disciples to live for him and for his glory. This is how Jesus wants us, even modern day disciples, to manage, to handle our money and our wealth. Now the story opens with a very wealthy businessman receiving a bad report of his manager. Now some Bible translations, I think if you use the NKJV, which is a good version, it uses the word stewards instead of manager. Frankly, actually, I prefer the word steward because it is more in line with the original culture and languages and so on. But anyway, whether it's steward or manager, it means the same. They mean the same thing. Charges were brought against the manager for wasting his master's resources. Obviously, this is not a case of careless wastefulness or extravagant. If that was the case, then the master could have easily sit down with the steward or with the manager and then work through with him as to how to more cost efficiently manage the operation. Fraud was involved. Fraud was involved in this overspending. Now, some of us reading it may be like, how? Okay, it says overspending. Why is it considered dishonest? How is fraud involved? How can fraud be involved? Very easy. Let me just give you two examples of how fraud can be involved in overspending. The oldest overspending could be due to the manager's spending on himself. He used the company's money for his own expenses. He used the company's money to buy stuff for himself and his families. Occasionally, you read in the newspaper, things like that happen, right? Taking advantage of the company's money. Or it could be a case of overpaying and then receiving a kickback. Now, this is how it worked. The manager agreed to buy something at an inflated price. That means at a price higher than the normal price. And then he will split the excess margin between himself and the seller. So, for example, if an item is sold at $1,000, the manager will connive with the seller to buy the item or to buy the service at $1,200. So what is the excess? The $200. That they will split between the seller and the manager. So it is a win-win arrangement for the two of them, right? But somebody lost out. Who lost out? The boss, the employer, okay? The owner, the rich man lost out in this deal, in this shenanigan here. Now, misappropriation of these two examples are common. Common in those days and common also in the present day. It is a form of stealing, okay? It is a form of stealing. And likely, I think one of those two or both of those two examples that I've given happened. So, the master received a credible report of the manager's fraudulent dealings. So he must have been caught red-handed with hard evidence. So this is clear, okay? I say this and I think this is clear because the manager did not protest his innocence or deny that he has cheated when the master confronted him. He didn't even bother to explain. Okay, what he did was he quickly began to think of another scheme as to how to get out of trouble. So the matter was established. The master fired the manager. Now, we can surmise from a story that the master was very well acquainted, very, very familiar with his manager. He knew him very, very well. Either he has worked for him for a long time or he is a slave in the household. You got to understand that at that time, okay? At that time, in those times, many of these stewards were slaves born into the household or bought. Okay, some of these slaves are very diligent, very hardworking, they are smart, and they are reliable. And then after a little while, the master will give them more responsibilities, will place them in position of responsibilities. So that's why they are so familiar with one another, and the master trusted. Okay, the master trusted his steward. So whichever is the case, there is a trust relationship that had been established over the years between the master and the manager. Now, I say that also because the master didn't seem to check on the manager until he knew about the fraud. Apparently, he left his business totally to the manager's care, giving him a free hand to make all business decisions, handle the finances, and manage the operations. There was no proper system of accountability. Okay, modern people like us, we look at it, there's no proper system of accountability, and that was how the fraud could happen, or rather it happened. And you can tell from a parable that the manager was a very smart guy, very capable, and probably also a smooth operator, a smooth talker. Now, all these factors, no doubt, contributed to the master's trust in the manager. Now, as an aside, let me digress for a little while since we are talking about the issue of accountability, the issues of checks and balances, and so on. So, as an aside, Having a system of accountability is important. Trust is important. People who don't like accountability often say, you don't trust me. You don't trust me. Have you heard subordinates saying that to the boss? Have you heard people saying that to their pastors? You don't trust me. Okay? But, trust is important. But it doesn't replace the need for accountability. Trust is important. But trust doesn't replace the need for accountability. Accountability protects both parties, the boss and the subordinate, the employer and the employee. Now, why do I say that? If there is no system, no proper system of accountability with checks and balances, when there is a proper system of accountability and checks and balances, people are kept on their toes, and that is a good thing. Accountability puts a check on temptation. Dishonest employees will think twice before they begin to wonder how they can game the system. Honest people also can fall into temptation if they are not careful. Normally, they will not cheat, right? An honest person will not normally cheat, but they can be tempted due to circumstances. For example, when there is a pressing need for money and an opportunity presents itself, people may succumb to the temptation. When they are desperate, people may succumb. Even good people, even honest people may succumb to temptation. Now, people like the manager in the parable might not start off with the intention to misappropriate, but without a system of checks and balances, the door is left wide open for monkey business. So, maybe the manager was thinking to himself, my master didn't even need to lift his finger. I've been working very hard for him. Year after year, I've been making a lot of money for him. So, I think I deserve more than I'm paid. And if I were to take a little from the master, if I were to take a little from the company's account, I don't think I'm cheating because I put in my fair share of labor. Okay, so much money has been made, I think I deserve a small share of it. And so, he started by taking a little. And because he was not caught, he went scot-free. He took a little more. And then he was still not caught. The little become more and it become even more. Now, that is what normally happen. For those who are caught embezzling millions of dollars, okay, people don't just siphon away $5 million, $10 million straight away. It's always progressive, bit by bit. Because I've gotten away with little, let me try a little bit more. I've gotten away with it, and then I say, hey, nobody is watching. Anyway, I'm in charge. I set the rules, okay? I'm the one that put the checks and balances. I know how to game the system, and by, okay, they become greedy, and they, begin to embezzle more and more money. Accountability puts a check on temptation. So now let's get back to the parable. The master fired the manager. He fired the dishonest manager. Now, knowing that he was caught with his hands in the cookie jar, he neither asked for forgiveness nor pleaded for leniency. He quickly sized up his situation and he considered his future. His prognosis was dire. His prospect didn't look good at all. So he made an honest evaluation of himself. He said, I'm not strong enough to dig, and I'm ashamed, to bet. Now, this is perhaps the only honest thing he did throughout the entire story. Okay, an honest evaluation of himself. And sometimes, my dear friends, we don't make honest evaluation of ourselves. We make honest assessment of other people. But when it comes to ourselves, we are not honest with ourselves. But this dishonest manager was very honest about himself. So he realized that he was only a white-collar bloke who have lost all credibility, and nobody is going to trust him again. He's not going to get another administrative job. He's not going to get another managerial job. So he was desperate. He was desperate. But unlike a lot of desperate people, he began to think. He began to think. Okay? He began to scheme. He began to put his brain to work. The manager was shrewd. He quickly hatched a plan. He saw a short window of opportunity. You see, the rich man had made another mistake. And the manager would seize the opportunity. His master had fired him, but he did not ask him to pack up and get lost immediately. Okay? So learn from the mistake over here. When your employee or when your subordinate did something terribly wrong, okay, you don't have to shout at them. Very nicely say, you're done wrong, I'm firing you, pack up and leave the office immediately. Get a security guard and escort him out there. But that didn't happen. What did the master do? The master still relied on him to turn in his account. He didn't know anything at all about the business. He said, turn in the account. In other words, go and straighten up your accounts and submit your account to me. So technically, okay, during this period, he was still under employment, right? He was still under employment. So it was a grave mistake on the part of the master. The shrewd manager gleefully jumped on the opportunity. He acted quickly and decisively. What was the manager's plan? What did he do? He would reduce the debts of his master's debtors to ingratiate himself to them. He would reduce their debts to get into their good books. They would owe him a big favor. Okay, you got to understand that to you right now, it's like, look, I won't be bought in so easily. But you got to understand the context of the parable, the context of the story. In ancient Jewish time and culture, reciprocation of favor was expected. To return a favor is a right thing to do. To return a favor is an honorable thing to do. So he knew that by reducing their debt, he had the guarantee that they would take good care of him after he had lost his job. A brilliant plan indeed. His future would then be secure. How many of you like the dishonest manager already? Okay, some wicked smile there. Note that these debt reductions were big. Okay, these are not kacang putih amount of money, all right? The debt reductions were big. Therefore, the favors owed to the manager were equally big. They were not small debts and favor. Okay, as we go along, you will realize. So the manager summoned all his debtors. Okay, one by one, come. Summon them. So they came. The first debtor owed his master 100 measures of oil. What oil is this? This one is not petroleum, it's not diesel. This is olive oil. And this is a staple item in the Mediterranean society at that time. So what did he do? He reduced it by half. He reduced the debt by half. 50% discount. Wow, very generous. So to give you a sense of how much olive oil we are talking about, 100 measures of oil work out to be about 875 gallons. In liters is 3,312 liters. Thereabout. I hope my conversion is correct. It's about there. So the price for 100 measures of olive oil, I just checked the old newspaper at that time. Okay, so we are talking about 1,000 denarii. It was worth 3 years of an ordinary man's wages. So 50% reduction means 1.5 years of a man's labor or a man's wages. And then the second debtor came. Second debtor owed his master 100 measures of wheat. Okay, 100 measures of wheat, and he slashed the debt by 20%. This one a little bit lesser, okay? But in absolute amount, actually it is bigger. 100 measures of wheat are equivalent to 1,000 bushels. Okay, any oil traders here, okay, you understand, or commodity traders, you know the measures of bushels. But for the rest of us, give you an idea of how much wheat that is. 100 acres of land were needed, okay, at that time, okay, were needed to produce this amount of wheat. The full value of that at that time was equivalent to 10 years worth of labor for a typical farmer with laborers. Okay, 10 years worth of labor. So a 20% reduction of the debt works out to be about 2 years of income. 2 years of income for a typical farmer. And ladies and gentlemen, these are just 2 debtors. I'm sure there are many debtors. You just imagine that there are only 10 debtors. The amount of debts that the manager forgave is a lot of money. It is a small fortune, enough to buy him sufficient favor to last a lifetime if he's frugal. Okay? If he live an ordinary life, he buy enough, he have bought for himself enough favor. Now, technically, the manager was not doing anything illegal. Technically, what he has done was legal because he was still under employment. But his action was immoral. His action was unethical. Call him shameless, call him conniving. He couldn't be bothered. He couldn't be bothered, okay? Why care when he was already disgraced? Why care when his reputation was already tarnished? There was only one thing on his mind. What is that? His survival, his future. How is he going to guarantee his future? How is he going to secure his future? That was the only thing on his mind. And for him, being dishonest was part of his nature. By hook or by crook, he must secure his future. And he did exactly that. He was happy. The debtors were happy. It was a win-win situation for both parties. The only person that lost out was the master, was the rich businessman. So far, so good, right? It was a very entertaining story. So here is where the story takes a surprising and startling turn. You would expect the parable to end like the story of the wicked servant. Okay, Jesus told the story of the wicked servant in the Olivet Discourse after talking about the events of the last days. And then he told a story to challenge his disciples to be faithful. So at the end of the story, Jesus said this, and we expect this parable to end like this story in Matthew 24, verses 50 to 51. The master of that servant will come on a day when he does not expect him, and at an hour he does not know, and will cut him in pieces and put him with the hypocrites. In that place there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. But no, Jesus didn't say that. Okay, let's look at Luke 16 verse 8. The master commended the dishonest manager for his shrewdness. The master commended the dishonest manager for his shrewdness. Now, this is totally unexpected and surprising. Instead of getting angry, Okay, after what the dishonest manager had done to him, he commended him. He praised him and said that, great, this guy, look at this guy, he stood. Imagine he were saying that to the other slaves and the other employees or the other servants of his. It's just like, it's totally startling. It's totally surprising. And then Jesus went on, okay? Let's look at the verse again. Jesus went on, for the sons of this world are more astute in dealing with their own generation than the sons of light. Who are the sons of light? You and I. Okay? We are the sons of God. Okay? We are the sons of the kingdom of God. Who are the sons of this world? The people of the world. And Jesus' command, after saying that the boss commended the dishonest manager for his truthfulness, Jesus commented that the people of the world are astuter, are smarter, are wiser in dealing with people than Christians. That's what Jesus said. That's what Jesus is saying here. Okay, let me do the hard part right now, the explanation. Here comes the explanation. The point of the parable is the shrewdness of the dishonest manager. Jesus was not praising the manager for his dishonesty. He was not praising him for his unethical dealing. Neither was Jesus approving of his conniving and unscrupulous methods of handling matters. Rather, Jesus was applauding his shrewdness. Jesus was praising his quick-wittedness. Jesus is essentially saying, look at the manager. He takes advantage of the short window of opportunity and use whatever resources that were available to him to secure for himself a future. He works quickly, he's resourceful, he has amazing foresight, he put his brain to work, he set his brain to think, he plans, he strategizes to win the friendship and favor of the debtors. Now, shrewdness means to be astute and having sharp powers of judgment. A shrewd person can assess people and situations incisively and make good decisions accordingly. Okay, that's a good definition. I got to struggle with it for a little while. Okay, I got to struggle with it for a little while, check this dictionary, that dictionary, and then I come up with this. I think it's a good definition of what shrewdness means. Many of us have a negative connotation of shrewdness. You check every dictionary, most dictionary, it doesn't have a negative connotation at all. Cunning has a negative connotation, but not shrewdness. So that's what shrewdness means. And shrewdness is one of the most important qualities of wisdom and discernment. It is a shade different from cunning. It can be a big difference, but actually the difference is only a shade. Okay, what is cunning? Cunning refers to a person which is skilled in achieving one's objective by deceit. Okay, cunning is the ability to achieve one's objective by deceit. So cunning is shrewdness with the element of deceit. Cunning is shrewdness with the element of deceit. So Jesus is saying, be shrewd, but don't be cunning. Caveat, okay? Give a caveat. In a wartime, you can do 孙子兵法. You can be deceptive in a warfare. Okay, when you fight battles for SAF, should it be necessary? You can be shrewd, you can be cunning. So Jesus told his disciples to be shrewd also in another passage in Matthew 10:16. Reading from the English Standard Version, which I've been using for my sermons, Jesus said, "Behold, I'm sending you as sheep in the midst of wolves. So be wise as serpents and innocent as doves." In the NIV, in the highly acclaimed New American Standard Bible, and in the Holman version, which is also a literal translation, it is translated as, "So be shrewd as serpents and innocent as doves." Be shrewd as serpent. Jesus is using serpent to give us the idea, okay, of what shrewdness means. And we go back to the original language, the original Greek, it means wisdom, it means shrewdness. Okay, the word, the definition is there. So, Jesus wants his disciples to be shrewd, not naive. Let me say that again. Jesus sent his people, his disciples among wolves. Wolves are cunning. So Jesus said, you've got to be shrewd. And we are living amongst the sons of the world. Many are shrewd. Many are shrewder than Christians, especially good Christians. Jesus said, be shrewd and not naive. Unfortunately, many good Christians are naive. Bad Christians are usually not naive. But unfortunately, good Christians are naive. Surprisingly naive in matters of the world, in worldly matters. We cannot afford to be naive or we'll be taken for a ride. Don't tell me, Pastor, I love a ride. You know what I mean, right? Taken for a ride. So let's take a look at Luke 16:8 again. What does it say? The master commended the dishonest manager for his shrewdness, for the sons of this world are more shrewd in dealing with their own generation than the sons of light. You see, many Christians mistakenly think that a believer ought to be straight as an arrow. I say no. Believers need to be shrewd and honest. We need to be shrewd and honest. We must be honest and not naive. We must be shrewd as serpents. Otherwise, we will not be effective in our dealings with the people of the world. Do you know that there are good Christians? Hopefully there are less now. I know many years ago you find more good Christians. Now you find less good Christians. And I'm honest to tell you about that. So many years ago, okay, when I was younger, many good Christians are really naive. Okay, I think now people are getting smarter, but Christians are not so good anymore, in the sense that they embrace a lot of worldly values. You know, I always tell people, I don't play politics. I really don't play politics because I hate politics, especially in the church context. But I understand politics. I understand how it is played. I understand politics enough to know how to spot it and to know how to counter it. And if I need to counter it, I'll counter it very aggressively. Don't talk to me about love and gentleness when countering politics. You don't do that, all right? You don't do that because you are going to be on the losing side of things. Look at Jesus in the gospel accounts. Consider how he dealt with the Pharisees and the religious leaders. He didn't play dumb with these hypocrites. He took them at their game of shenanigans. They were often disingenuous, saying one thing but mean another thing. Do you think Jesus sit down with them and just, drink tea with them and try to persuade them, try to convince them? No. Jesus is often blunt and direct with them because Jesus knew that these are political animals. Jesus knew that they are smart, they are conniving, and they are disingenuous. And so Jesus often goes straight to the point, exposing them even publicly. A lot of people don't don't want to look at this part of what Jesus is doing. They like to look at Jesus like a, like Mary had the little lamb, meh, meh, very gentle, very sweet. I mean, Jesus can be angry at the right thing, or at the wrong things rather. You're a hypocrite, especially if you look at the gospel account. You play politics, he went straight to the point. So we must be stood as serpents. We must not be naive, but we must be honest in all our dealings. We must be men and women of integrity. After commending the dishonest manager for his truthfulness and highlighting the need for the sons of light to be shrewder, Jesus went on to highlight 3 lessons for his disciples. Now, these 3 lessons have to do with our attitude towards money. All 3 lessons have to do with our attitude towards money, with respect to 3 different categories of people. Number 1 is with respect to other people, believers and unbelievers. Number 2 is with respect to us, we ourselves. And number 3 is with respect to God. So let's take it one at a time. The first lesson, use money to make friends. The first lesson, use money to make friends. Let's look at Luke 16:9 once again. And Jesus said, I tell you, make friends for yourself by means of unrighteous wealth. Your money, it basically means your money. Make friends for yourself by means of unrighteous wealth, so that when it fails, these people may receive you into their eternal dwellings. Can you understand or not? Some of you nod your head, but I find it very difficult to understand. Okay, especially when you want to connect with the parable itself. I find it very difficult. So I flip a few commentaries to see what various commentators have to say. Different things. Most of them not satisfactory. Some of them satisfactory. And I put them all together. I think this is the best explanation that I can offer you. Okay, so let me begin by paraphrasing Luke 16:9. Okay, let me paraphrase it. Can we put up the paraphrase? Leslie English version. L-E-V. Okay? L-E-V. From today on, there's a L-E-V. Okay? So this is Jesus speaking, right? In the paraphrase L-E-V version. And I tell you, make friends for yourselves by using your money and wealth, so that when they become useless in eternity, these friends whom you have blessed on earth will thank you and warmly welcome you. Let me unpack my own paraphrase. Let me unpack my own paraphrase, okay? As much as possible, linking really to the parable itself. So Jesus commended the dishonest manager. For what? For his truthfulness. For his truthfulness in regard to what? In regard to planning for his future. Okay? The mention here is eternity, right? So in regard to planning for his future, likewise, Christians ought also to plan for their eternity. I don't need to tell you to plan for your future. You plan, you retirement planning, this, that, your future, educational needs of your children. Future planning, I don't think I need to teach you. Every one of you are savvy in that. But we need to be thinking, okay, about our eternity planning. Don't just stop at salvation. Okay, listen very carefully. Don't just stop at salvation. We thank God that we are saved. We thank God that someday we will spend our eternity with Him, happily ever after. But there is more to eternity than just salvation. There is more to eternity than just salvation and getting there safely. I know the mentality of most Christians. All I want to is to make sure to finish well so that I get safely to heaven. And once I enter the pearly gate, whew, and you don't think about the rest. I know that the Bible didn't say too many things about eternity, but there were enough there for us to think, for us to consider how we want to spend our eternity. So if the dishonest manager and the sons of this world would have spent so much mental energy and physical effort to plan for their future, why don't we Christians consider what is going to happen to our eternity? Why don't we spend time considering and planning for our eternity? So essentially, Jesus is saying to his disciples to use their money and worldly wealth to make friends for the sake of their eternity. Jesus is telling his disciples to make use of their money and worldly wealth to make friends for the sake of their own eternity. Make friends with the non-believers with the intention to eventually preach the gospel to them and bring them into the kingdom of God. Make good friendship, build good friendship with fellow Christians. Spend money, use your money. Buy them a cup of coffee, a good one. You know, I don't drink coffee. I'm not a coffee drinker, but I drink coffee bean. If I ever drink, okay, which is not often. So you want to buy me coffee, you must buy me coffee bean, more expensive. Buy them nice coffee, take them out for a nice dinner, if for nothing, just for fellowship and to encourage them. Okay? Do that and help the poor brothers and sisters amongst us financially. Bless them in whatever way you can. Don't be stingy with our money. Find ways and means to make use of our money to make friends, whether Christian friends or non-Christian friends. Build bridges to them with them, so that you can make good friends with them. You can influence them with your good influence. Hopefully your influence is good. With the Bible, with good stuff and all that. Do that. And then contribute financially to gospel ministries and gospel causes. Okay? Contribute to societies that help the orphans and help the poor. Do all these things. Be generous with your money. You know what Jesus said? Every time you are generous with your money, you are laying up for yourself treasures in heaven. Every time you are doing that, you are investing in eternity. See the connection there? Use your money to invest in eternity. When you make friends, when you bring non-Christian friends, okay, use your money to buy them coffee, take them out for dinner and lunch, and after 1 year, 2 years, they come to know Christ. That is a great reward. Okay, that is a great reward. For them, and in a sense, satisfaction for ourselves. That is the way we are told to use our money. Okay, by doing so, you are investing in eternity, just as the dishonest manager make plans for his futures. We got to make plans for our eternity. Make plans for your non-Christians' friends' eternity. Make plans, okay, for the eternity for your other Christian friends. Some of them need encouragement. Some of them need you to come alongside them, to just pray with them, to help them. You can do a lot of all these things just by spending a little bit of money. Take them out for a meal. Bless them. You will receive rich, and then seize every opportunity that comes your way to invest in eternity. You will receive rich returns on your investments in eternity in the form of God's appreciation and reward in terms of personal satisfaction, and you will get whispers of gratefulness and shouts of appreciation and thanks from these people whom we have blessed on earth. The day when you meet them in heaven, they will come by you, they will come around you, they will thank you. They will tell the Lord, this is the man, this is the woman that have blessed me in little ways. And second lesson, your faithfulness on earth is the basis of your reward in eternity. Now, the first lesson has to do with our attitude towards money as it relates to other people. The second lesson as it relates to us, we ourselves. Luke 16, 10 to 12. One who is faithful in a very little is also faithful in much. And one who is dishonest in a very little is also dishonest in much. If you have not been faithful in the unrighteous wealth, who will entrust you with true riches? And if you have not been faithful in that which is another's, who will give you that which is your own? Now, there are two principles of money here. The first principle is, if you are faithful with a little, you will also be faithful with much. The converse is also true. If you cannot be faithful with a little, you will not be faithful with much. Now, I've heard people saying, if I only have more, then I will give. The answer is, no, you will not. If you don't give when you have a little, you will not give when you have more. It is more difficult to give when you have more. Now, over the years, I have the opportunity to talk to many people. Now, I'll tell you that wealthy people tend to tithe less. Wealthy people tend to tithe less. A person with an annual income of $1 million will find more difficult to tithe $100,000 than a person with an annual income of $60,000 and having to tithe $6,000. This is a fact. And the way to avoid this is to tithe faithfully as your income rises through the years. Make it a habit. The second principle, if you are not faithful in managing worldly wealth, God will not entrust you with eternal riches. If you are not faithful in managing worldly wealth, God will not entrust you with eternal riches. Your faithfulness in stewardship in this life will be the basis of your eternal rewards and responsibilities. Now, Jesus also teaches this in two other parables. The parable of the talents and the parable of the minas. The principle extends beyond financial giving to how believers serve God with their time, effort, and spiritual giftings, and how they make use of the opportunities given to them. So please take note, how we manage our money has implications for our eternity. Therefore, be shrewd. Consider carefully the two principles that Jesus taught. Know the rules of the game and manage your earthly wealth accordingly. Plan for your eternity. Seriously consider how you can be a faithful manager of the perishable wealth that has been entrusted to you in order to secure a good return of imperishable riches in eternity. That is what the shrewd manager would do if he were converted. Now, let me give you a tip for financial stewardship. Know that everything you possess is a gracious gift from God. All your wealth ultimately belongs to God. They don't belong to you. You're only holding it in trust for God, for the purpose of investing it wisely for His kingdom's sake and for His glory. Now, finally, the third lesson, and with this I will close. Okay, with this I will close. The third lesson, serve God and not money. Serve God and not money. The first and second lessons have to do with our attitude towards money as it relates to people and to us, respectively. The third lesson has to do with our attitude towards money as it relates to God. Luke 16:13. No servant can serve two masters, for either he will hate the one and love the other, or he will be devoted to the one and despise the other. You cannot serve God and money. The main idea here is not to let money usurp the place of God in our hearts. Christians owe their loyalty and allegiance to God, not money. We must always remember this. God alone is our master, and money is to be our servant. We are supposed to use money and wealth to serve God and His kingdom purposes. Now, sadly, many people, including believers, are enslaved to money. Money becomes their God. This ought not to be the case. Now, if you consider yourself to be a serious follower of Christ Jesus, then bear this in mind. God is your master, not money. God is your master, not money. So, serve God and not money. Let me end by saying this. I pray that you will be wise and shrewd in the way you handle money. Serve God, not money. Be a faithful steward. Invest in eternity. Amen.